Hey guys, Paul here. So today I wanted to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh's recent changes to the end of match procedures in tournaments and my personal experiences with them. As you guys know, they recently changed how end of match procedures work, where rounds are a little bit longer, they're 50 minutes now, but also when time gets called in a round, there is no more playing till the end of the phase or the turn or damage comparisons. It's just both players lose the match immediately. You get a double loss. And when they announced this was extremely divisive, very contentious. A lot of people felt like this is something that could be heavily exploited in any number of ways. Other people were like, it's going to be fine. You guys are all over exaggerating. I wanted to maybe talk about it in a video myself, but I kind of don't enjoy like having just knee-jerk reactions to things and being like, this is the worst thing to happen to Yu-Gi-Oh ever. It's going to kill the game, or this is going to save competitive Yu-Gi-Oh. Instead, I just decided, okay, we'll wait and see how it actually goes in tournaments. So there have been 2 weekends worth of tournaments now, and a lot of people have gone to regionals, gone to locals, tried it out, and like seen how it works. And so since I've now gotten the chance to play with these new time rules myself at locals twice now, once last weekend at a pretty normal locals, and then again this past weekend where we were playing in the WCS locals thing, World's Championship, the thing where you can win the World's envelope basically. So like a hair more competitive of a locals. I've gotten some experience with it and I wanted to just share my thoughts. And I have to say, just very mixed up front. Very mixed and not in the way that you would expect. A lot of people sort of going into this were like, everybody's just going to, if they lose game 1, they're just going to slow play through game 2 and like drag their opponent down with them, you know, and just take double losses out of spite and stuff. That wasn't exactly what I experienced, but we'll get there. So first of all, the regular locals that I had about a week ago was totally fine. We had 1 round, I believe, that actually went to time. It was 2 people who weren't in like the top table finals or anything, so they weren't like, you know, playing for first place, but they had a double match loss. And it was not a particularly big deal. They took it in stride. Nobody was like spiteful or angry or slow playing or anything like that. It just kind of seemed like it just happened. It just hit the time limit. And they were okay with it because it didn't really change how many packs that they were going to get as their prize or anything like that. However, fast forward to this weekend and things do change a little bit. So we had 4 rounds at my locals this past weekend. So like a normal locals, about a dozen people. And because there was a prize on the line, people were, you know, definitely trying to win. But it was still locals. It was still really chill. Everybody kind of knows each other. It's not, you know, a super intense like experience. The biggest issue that I noticed with the 50-minute timer really came down to the fact that it makes records very messy when you're playing in a small tournament like locals. Because if you only have like a dozen people and, you know, you're going into round like 2 with a bunch of people having double losses, and then round 3 with a bunch of people having double losses. I mean, I think when we started our 4th round, there was maybe 1 person who had gotten 2 wins, who had 2 wins, and one of their wins I think was just from a bye. It was like really insane. And so it basically meant that like for a lot of times it felt like pairings were just sort of like a little bit more random feeling, and matches didn't get to feel very conclusive, very like, I guess it's like anticlimactic when the time runs out and you just both lose. The thing is though, nobody was doing the slow play stall thing to my understanding. I didn't hear anyone complain about that. What more so happened was literally people just did not finish. And I think that part of the reason why they didn't finish, from what I could observe, was mostly because it's locals, so things are a little bit more chill, and you almost aren't allowed to be too chill and too relaxed and friendly, even though it's locals, because when time runs out, you just both lose. So like, normally at a regional, when I'm playing at those events, it's just a little bit less talkative, right? Like it's a large event, you don't really know anybody who's there, and so like there's less of a like small talk thing, which this makes it sound so like harsh, like you're not allowed to be nice and you're not allowed to talk, and that's not what I'm saying, but like at locals, people kind of goof around more, they shoot the shit more, they like, you know, trash talk, and just people meander and they make casual conversation, and it's all these things that like really eat away at the time. And in addition to that, because it was a locals tournament, a lot of people were playing more like of your fun pet deck style things, right? Like it's not just people playing like Justice Hunters decks or whatever. It was somebody was playing Monarchs, right? Somebody was playing Ryuge. That was actually Alex was playing Ryuge. There were a lot of different decks that like you wouldn't necessarily know about. And so because there was such a mix, it meant that a lot of people were having to stop and read cards. And this is something that I have talked about a lot in the past, like in a slightly different way, which is that like having to read cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just too difficult to do in the constraints of like a 45-minute round. And so now that we have 50 minutes, it feels like it's a little bit more, but it's still not that much more. Like if you don't already know what your opponent's stuff does and you're having to sort of read it for the first time and like parse it out and sort of think about how things work and synergize and what you're going to chain, it just doesn't cut it. Just to go through my rounds really quickly, I was able to win my first round against the Monarch player that I was describing earlier. It was nice. I won the first round pretty handily. In the second round, he actually conceded. There was none of that like, oh, I'm gonna just drag this out and try to like hit time and get us to both lose. We weren't concerned about that. I don't think that thought really entered anybody's head. I think we finished well within time, and it was fine, and like that wasn't a big deal. But then in my next round, I was playing against Draco Tail. It was actually Alec who ended up winning the tournament. Congrats to him. But I was playing against Draco Tail, playing Vanquish Soul, and like these are Justice Hunters kind of style decks, which means to say lots of chains, complicated game states. Things are really a bit of a mess. And like by a mess, I don't mean like bad. I just mean like there can be like you can be on like chain link 6, 7, 8 constantly and playing on each other's turns and stuff. And so there's just a lot to sort of, the mental stack is really high. And we ended up going to time and we just got a double loss. And it really kind of sucked because we were having a good game. Like I do feel like I didn't get the impression that anybody was slow playing. The game state got complicated and, you know, that really sucks. And then in my next round, I played against a Vanquish Soul K9 player that I know. And, you know, friendly guy, he definitely didn't slow play. I don't think so. I didn't think I slow played, but we got to game 3 and it just kind of, because of the nature of that matchup where there's so much chaining and so much thinking, we just weren't able to finish. Again, I don't think anybody was like dragging it out or trying to like, you know, drag anyone down. Just that's how it ended up. And then it's funny because in my 4th round, I played against a Malice player he was totally cool. There was no, like, he wasn't rude to me. There wasn't anything like that. But he had just gotten a, like, slightly more dramatic double match loss because, like, he was in the battle phase and he was about to be able to win and then time got called and they both took a double loss. And so he was kind of just a little antsy when he was playing against me. Not rude to me, but just, like, literally I just think, like, he was, like, you know, just kind of stressed and exhausted from, like, all this double match loss stuff. And so he wanted to just like play quickly and that caused him to make some misplays. And I was able to win my last round, which is like nice and all, but I didn't end up winning the tournament or anything. That was obviously Alec, but it was more like by the time the tournament was over, so many different people, not just myself, but so many different people had gotten double match losses that we were all just freaking exhausted by it. Like it just was like, man, you know, this sort of sucks. The end records were people who just after 4 rounds was like, yeah, 1-3, 1-3, 1-3. Like, you know, just the records were really not great. Some people were like 2-2, and it just didn't feel very satisfying. What I think is more so the case, though, from the people that I've talked about, like at regionals, is that it doesn't seem like this happens as much at regionals, or at least it doesn't get talked about as much. So what I mean by that is like, I think at a regional, the expectation is that people are more prepared because the type of person who's going to go to a regional is going to be a little bit more competitive, a little bit more prepared for the metagame. They know exactly what their stuff does and they're more like prepared in different matchups. And so there's more of an understanding that you're going to play fast and like you're going to just know what's going on and be decisive, which the new rules encourage. And so it feels like, you know, it doesn't matter as much. Also because there are so many people at a regional, people having bad records, like, you know, we're going in round 4 and a bunch of people are like X3 and X4 because of these double losses. There are still going to be a lot of people who are doing well because their matches just didn't go into time. They finished expediently and they're at the top tables and they don't really have to care. But I do think that, and we started talking about this actually in our podcast last week. I think that the people that are probably hurt the most by these new time rules are people who are playing at a slightly more casual level or just in a slightly more casual setting, where the antsiness and the tension is not quite so high, but you can still end up just suffering from a double match loss anyway. I think it works well at regionals from what I've heard. I haven't technically observed it myself, but like from what I've heard, seems like it's fine at regionals, not so great in my experience at locals. And that brings me to my last major point, which is that I think that Yu-Gi-Oh! With these new rules is you can view it glass half empty, glass half full. The glass half full sort of charitable interpretation, I guess, would be that it is trying to really encourage players to like learn and be prepared, and most importantly, advocate for yourself. If you feel like your opponent is slow playing, call that judge immediately, speed your opponent up. It's, I believe that people can do that. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that you have to be very decisive with your plays. There's no second guessing yourself. There's no like take stuff back or like kind of, oh, should I do this? Should I not? You just kind of got to go. And I think that like that's fine. I actually don't mind the idea of, the onus being on players to kind of like take responsibility and like approach your match confidently. I think that the less charitable way of looking at it though is just that this means that if you are playing against a deck you've never seen because you don't, you're not like wired into the metagame at all times, it's gonna probably just go to time those first few rounds. And like, this is something that might change in the coming weeks and months as players get more used to these time rules and they kind of come into tournaments more prepared. I think that it could get better, but I really feel like it should not really apply at the local level. I think that at regionals and YCSs, where the setting is more competitive and understood, the time rules are probably fine. I think that locals, if your locals wants to do like house rules, like we were talking about that at our shop, we were like, hey, after today, where everybody was so deflated after the tournament, it's like, do we just like, how do we want to do this moving forward? Because it seems like it's just kind of more stressing people out than anything. And so we still haven't reached a consensus on it exactly, but I thought that was kind of interesting. And then also, I think that this makes Yu-Gi-Oh! Seem like such a grueling game. Not just from like the rules being hard, but actually from like tournaments being so unforgiving now. It's just, like if you can't figure things out, you just both lose. That part feels harsh from a like new player standpoint. And I'm not a new player, but I can see where like if you are a newer player or you're kind of getting back in, like for instance, I've been getting him back into like, sort of playing Paper Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. He has not played for a long time and he likes the Ryuge deck. And Alec has also been playing like the Draco Tail deck. And, I was like, yeah, Justice Hunters is out. The format feels pretty fun. And so maybe you guys can like start playing that more. And they've both jumped into it with gusto. However, the thing is, Alex like is playing Ryuge, which is a deck that nobody knows what that stuff does. Like it's very obscure, not that many people play it, and it works in a very like particular way. Like you got these continuous spells that give the monsters certain effects. So like your opponent's having to read the continuous spells, and then also read the monsters. And remember that it's not the continuous spells that are having their effects activating. It's like the monsters that are having their effects activating, but it's through the continuous spells being faced. You get what I'm saying, right? It's very deck that's playing its own game type of thing. And that's fine, but then when he's playing against a Yummy deck, which he's never played against Yummy before, and Yummy can chain to everything, and they're so like slippery and interactive, but also the Yummy player that he's facing has not played against Ryuge and has no clue what these cards do, it's gonna be a mess. Like it's a recipe for disaster. Both people are having to read these cards, and for decks that can't like finish the opponent off really fast, man, you're gonna hit time, and it sucks because like it's locals. So yeah, I guess that's my thoughts on it. I don't think that the rules work very well for like a small player count, kind of more chill setting. I think that they probably work better at large events. Should they change them back? I mean, they won't. So there's not really much use in like asking for that. I think it's Konami. Like we're just probably stuck with these rules. And I don't even know that like the old time rules would be much better, because like burn is still really broken and like it still feels anticlimactic. It just means that one person will get a win as opposed to nobody getting a win, but the loser will probably still feel just as bitter. And I think like that's maybe the small silver lining. And like I promise I'm not trying to make this sound like some excuse for it all, but the small silver lining is when you both get a double loss, at least both people aren't usually angry at each other. At locals anyway, at my locals. Like the players were usually not mad at each other because like I said, it wasn't slow playing that people were doing and like spite, drag you down to hell thing. It was we just didn't get to finish our game. And so since we both lost and we're both bitter, we can at least connect on the fact that we are both bitter. So that's something. I don't know. I wanted to just give you guys an update on it and sort of where my thoughts were with it. I think I, at first, was kind of more passive about the rules. I was like, well, it's fine. Now I'm really more like, I don't think that they're very good for new or just casual settings. And yeah, but I've said that a billion times now. It's like 15 minutes. Let me just shut up. Thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let me know down below in the comments what your experiences have been at locals or regionals. I'd love to hear and chat about it. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.